Okay, we are on chapter 4 of God Will Work With You, But Not For You, A Living Philosophy by Lao Russell. And this chapter is headed, Why Am I Here? Question, why am I here? Answer, you are here to manifest God, your creator, as one unit of the idea of man. You are here to become an actor in the cosmic drama of cause and effect, which the master playwright has conceived to express the idea of love, upon which basis the universe is founded. That means that you are to take the very long journey of life, which begins in a single cell of protoplasm. That single cell is centered by your soul, which is your mind control, during the long ages of building your body under the guidance and constant cooperation of your centering soul. That journey takes millions of years of gradual transformation from physical awareness of body to spiritual awareness of mind. The journey ends in complete universality or oneness with God. The journey of the unfoldment of the man idea, which we call the human race, is divided into 5 stages. They are as follows. The first stage was the primate, unmoral, instinctively controlled period of mere bodybuilding and fighting for survival. Man, the fighter and procurer of food, was supreme. Woman was only considered man's chattel and slave. This stage ended at the dawn of consciousness. The second stage is the present pagan or barbarian sense-dominated stage. It is the beginning of awareness between right and wrong, and the elevation of woman to an ever-increasing importance, but never of sufficient importance to create a balanced civilization. Even today, it is still a man's world. Instinctive control lessens as man recognizes the unfolding of mind and exercises free will. This barbarian stage is characterized by greed for material possessions and power over others, which it acquired by might over right practices. This barbarian stage will continue as long as man kills man, believes in evil, and suppresses woman to less than full equality with man. The third stage is the mind-dominated first stage of consciousness, or the genius period. It is the second moral period of higher ideals and greater God awareness. It is also the first stage where man knowingly becomes co-creator with God by being able to transfer invisible mind idea into visible body forms. The genius fully comprehends the rhythms of God's language and interprets those rhythms for other men. The barbarian and the genius stages overlap, for there have already been several hundred geniuses among the billions of barbarians. During the genius stage, the idea of evil almost entirely disappears. And, this book was written, let's just double check and see when this book was written. It looks like first edition was 1955, so she was writing it before then. That's about when Alice Bailey was done writing the Ageless Wisdom, the treatises on. So, the fourth stage is the cosmic conscious period of unfolding. It is the higher moral and spiritual stage of complete God awareness. This period is distinctly marked by the disappearance of instinctive control, sense of evil, and forgetfulness of body. It is the stage of the mystic who is almost fully omniscient and omnipotent. 20 or 30 humans have already reached this high stage. And I'm thinking that we can go on more or less at this point and say that there's been many more. The fifth stage is Christ consciousness, or complete awareness of unity with God. This is the final stage of universality, omniscience, and omnipotence in man. In the Christ conscious being, love has been fully manifested on earth, and evil has fully disappeared. One man only has ever reached this final stage of all men. In order to better comprehend the plan of life and man's purpose on Earth, we will review the 5 stages in more detail. It's definitely a curious thing when they talk about evil has fully disappeared, and evil is disappearing at certain stages and then it's gone. And this is something to contemplate in ourselves and something that we can talk about certainly at some point, because we know that at these higher levels of consciousness, all is working for the whole, right? It's all working for the good. So that the answer probably lies in there, but can be expounded on in terms of talking about duality and the higher levels. And I think even Lao Russell talks about this in some of the earlier parts of the book. And I believe the Masters, the Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East certainly go into that. And the Ageless Wisdom does as well. Alice Bailey books. Primate man. First stage. The man idea begins with the slow building of a body when the planet spirals far enough away from the sun to have prepared the conditions which are necessary for the unfoldment of human life. The first cycles of man's life start with a few minutes duration and increase in duration. The first cycles of man's life start with a few minutes duration and increase in duration over a period of millions of years as desire for a body adds more and more cells. Single cells first divide into male and female opposites by the polarizing power of the electric current of nature. As cells multiply, however, their ever-complexing patterns must be recorded in the soul seed record. Life cycles gradually lengthen by that complexing and recording process until the life cycle nears 80 years. The period of gestation has also lengthened from a few minutes to 9 months. Everything the body needs to fulfill its desires, it borrows from the earth and returns every milligram of those borrowings to the earth when it can no longer function as a body. Desire gradually creates all bodies cell by cell. Body unfoldment keeps pace with desire for body. As desire adds new parts and abilities, each new part, which is extended from its center of control, must be wired to that center in order that it may be operated from its centering intelligence. That which we call wiring in an electric machine made by man, we call sensing living organic machines created by God. The senses of the body are two-way message carriers to all parts of the body, from the mind through the brain and back again. It is commonly supposed that we have 5 senses: hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and seeing. We have but one sense, however, the sense of feeling. We feel through our eyes, ears, our palate, our bodies, and our nostrils. The one sense of feeling is the vibration of the electric current as it passes through our nerves. That sense of electric vibration is the only thing which makes the body aware of its existence. When the body is electrically charged, it has an electrical awareness of body existence. Without sufficient electrical charge in a body to send vibration impulses along its wires, it has no sense of existence. That is what happens when one sleeps. As the body extends in complexity and mass, its centering seat of sensation, which we call the brain, also enlarges its 2 growing electric battery cells, which act as self-starters for body activities. This too-low electric storage battery, which the brain is, has no knowledge whatsoever. It is no more related to intelligence than one's fingernail. The seat of intelligence, or mind, or soul, is located in the pituitary gland. When mind thinks, it expresses its desires electrically through the brain when the body batteries are sufficiently charged to motivate the brain. Very few people think with their mind, however. They sense with their brain by releasing its stored-up records, which we call memories. The entire office of the brain is to receive, transmit, and record sensations when it has sufficient electrical charge to operate the body machine. All storage batteries run down, however. Human, animal, and vegetable storage batteries become completely discharged daily. They become like the dead batteries of your car. Being unable to send messages to other parts of the body, the senses lose all of their electrical awareness. The body loses all sense of existence for a period of several hours every day. When our electric batteries thus become discharged, we say that we are asleep. When our heartbeat renews its power to charge our batteries, we say we are awake. We also say other things which are not true to nature's plan. We say that we are unconscious. We use that word in a sense that implies our consciousness ceases. Our consciousness is our immortal, eternal intelligence that never ceases. Mind intelligence is always conscious, but the thinking of mind is electric. Electricity is divided into action and rest periods, which we call cycles. 1/2 of every electric cycle starts from rest and extends into multiplied action. This could be likened to a man awakening from rest and working hard all day. The other half divides the power for action and returns to rest, as man does when he can no longer work and must rest. That is the life-death principle of electric bodies. To live, they must start from rest in their seed to grow into action. To die, they must reverse the process and decay into rest in their seed. Consciousness has no life-death cycles. Consciousness belongs to the immortality of mind. It is eternally changeless. The misconception of the so-called state of unconsciousness is based on the premise that the brain is the mind, instead of being only a switchboard through which the mind can think, or the senses can operate when it is sufficiently charged. That which is really the conscious mind is what is presumed to be the subconscious mind. There is no subconscious mind. Mind is not stratified. There is only mind at rest and mind in action, which means thinking. When you sleep, thinking you are unconscious, your intelligence is as wide awake as it always is, but you have turned off the electric current which allows you to think or sense through your body. You will comprehend this better if you step into your car and press the self-starter button. Nothing happens. You can say that its batteries are dead. You do not say that it is asleep. Neither do you say it is unconscious. You are the conscious intelligence which centers and controls the motivation of your car, but you cannot move it. If you awaken it by charging its batteries for 10 minutes, it will move a little, but it will not have full power to move until fully charged. Likewise, you can awaken a man who has slept only a short time, and he can move, but he could not fulfill a normal day of activity until he has caught up with his sleeping, which means until his batteries have been fully recharged. This misconception about subconscious and superconscious mind is a deterrent to the principle which says, "Man, know thyself," which is necessary for mankind in order that he can steer his ship through the complex dangers of the sea of life. During man's whole first stage, he builds his body and fights for its survival by instinctive control from his centering soul. He has no will of his own. He merely obeys the electric messages sent through his nerves wiring, and he obeys these commands as automatically as a stone falls directly toward the center of gravity. When a telegram is sent through a wire, the wire has no comprehension whatsoever of the idea contained in the message. Neither does primate man have any idea of the commands which are sent through his senses. He merely lives and obeys his instincts the way birds, insects, and other living bodies obey. As he continues to obey, he builds his body and adds constantly to it. He constantly transforms his body, and his brain enlarges to meet its complexing needs. His slanting forehead straightens, his crouching body stands erect, and his massive jaws grow smaller. During this entire period, he has no creative faculty whatsoever. He can reason somewhat with his senses, but he never even created a boat, nor a sail, wheel, or fire until after the dawn of mind awareness in him. Likewise, he had no moral sense, either of good or evil, until consciousness first dawned in him, which was only about 15,000 years ago in man's history. During the entire primate period, woman had no place of importance in man's life other than as a chattel. Man fought for family survival, and fighting for it was the thing of first import. Nothing else counted. The primate world was entirely a man's world. The pagan barbarian man. The second stage of man's unfolding is the pagan or barbarian age, which we are now in. It began when the first faint suspicion of a higher power than man entered his consciousness. He then began to think, to reason, to discover flame, the boat, the sail for the boat, and the wheel. The idea of morality dawned in his unfolding awareness. He divided right from wrong. There was good and evil. He began to command matter by knowing about matter. He commanded the earth to yield harvests for him and made implements to multiply his command. Women worked with him in the ground. She raised his sheep, his goats, his cattle. She made tents and raiment. Woman began to be important in man's esteem instead of only in his life. The forever search for the great unknown led to sun worship, demon worship, idol worship. Man then made gods of wood, of stone, man gods, always man gods, made in man's image for man. Long centuries passed, and the one God was envisioned by man. He still remained the male God made in the image of man for man. Man made him to be like man, to be pleased with the shedding of blood, to be wrathful, vengeful, and quick to anger. Men worshipped their male god of wrath at altars drenched with blood. Tens of thousands of sheep, goats, and bullocks were slain to appease God in hope of remission of sins. Neophytes were drenched with overflowing fountains of blood at their baptismal ceremonials. Heroic pagan legends told of the pleasure given to their one god of wrath by some hero who slew 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass, and similar heroic stories conceived by barbarians who still remembered their primate days and still loved bloodshed, slaughter, and conquest of man by man. Great civilizations grew and fell again and again, each time to arise a little higher and again fall. Relics and monuments remained above the earth to tell of these civilizations. Pyramids and temples and tombs in Egypt, in the high Andes, in Yucatan, in Tibet, and India. Evil became a reality as man thought evil and practiced it. Evil became legendary. Magic, the supernatural, the unnatural, and the miraculous formed the basis of thousands of pagan legends about evil and the reality of evil. The most damaging of these pagan legends to human progress is that monstrous legend which would have you believe that a serpent could have intelligent conversation with a woman, that a serpent had knowledge of good and evil, that good and evil grew on a tree, and that evil came into the world because a man ate an apple. The viciousness of the legend lies in the assumption that the evil and sin of the world is God's holy law of mating, which unites fathers and mothers of creation into one so that they can again create more fathers and mothers to continue God's plan. It made our God of love to be the creator of evil. This legend of evil created evil itself by being one of the causes of plunging all that is good in man into 12 centuries of bestial sex degeneration. It bred cruelties and tortures of 2 inquisitions. Countless thousands of people still believe this early pagan legend, which typifies the stage of gross ignorance of the world of that day. It demonstrates how difficult it is for man to escape from his own primacy. These legends have become tradition to man, which means that he believes things unthinkingly because he has always believed them, so he no longer subjects them to logical reasoning. Such beliefs hold mankind back by retarding the unfolding of his higher spiritual nature. Just so long as man prefers to be pagan by insisting upon pagan beliefs and practices, he will still be pagan. Man is always what he thinks. He cannot become spiritually exalted by being physically depraved or by thinking depravity. Pagan memories are still interwoven into our enlightenment of today as tradition, and tradition is strong because it is repeated unthinkingly. We even unthinkingly sing pagan traditional hymns. We sing, "There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose their guilty stains." That hymn would have been appropriate for a pagan baptismal festival where dozens of live animals were slaughtered to appease the bestial god of their own bestial conceiving, but not for the gatherings of gentle people who would shudder with terror at such a scene. It takes many centuries of higher civilizations to eliminate the traditional beliefs of our early pagan days in which devils, demons, evil spirits, and other superstitions of that day's gross ignorance are still carried into this day. As long as our beliefs are pagan, our civilization will be pagan. God sent mind-illumined messengers to hasten the unfoldment of man's spiritual nature. The Buddha, Zoroaster, Moses, Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Jesus to tell of the one God of love, but tradition was stronger than truth. That is an incredible statement there, isn't it? Tradition is stronger than truth. The male god of wrath and fear persisted in their day and still persists in ours. For instance, we still continue to say we are a nation of God-fearing men, whereas we should say we are a nation of God-loving men. The roots of dead beliefs are hard to uproot, but man must suffer until they are rooted out of him. He must suffer by living in the world of his own making, and the kind of world he makes is the kind of man he is. Man thinking created the warring world of fear, hatred, enmity, and disunity we are forced to live in today. Man made it in his own likeness, in his own male thinking image. Genghis Khan made the world of his day in his own image. Then came Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, Frederick and Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible, William the Conqueror, Napoleon, Bismarck, Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, Mussolini, and other male conquerors, tyrants, dictators, marauding bands of Huns, Tartars, Manchus, Norsemen, and other terrorists who have made the world over repeatedly in their male images. Women slowly rose in man's esteem in parts of the world. Wherever woman made her influence felt as the spiritual mate of her physical man, nations responded to that influence and progressed with great rapidity. Wherever woman was suppressed, however, that nation retrogressed. It could not keep up with world flow. The measure in which any country has progressed is the measure of its recognition of woman. Man still thinks of himself as master in his own house. He still thinks of his own mental superiority as ruler of world government and world business. He still thinks of a woman as a cook and homemaker. When women organized to fight for equal suffrage rights, men thought of it as an utter absurdity. But when man's wars made it imperative for women to share in manufacturing industry, she excelled men in many capacities, even though it was all new thinking for her. Man's seemingly total ignorance of God's plan concerning the man-woman mate relationship has made him unaware that he created man and woman as equal halves of one, for unity is impossible between two unequal halves. Man the marauder, the fighter, the conqueror, has had millions of years to remember his life-destroying days of killing to take happiness away from others. Women, the mother, the giver of life, has had millions of years to remember the service she has given to man. The spiritual love nature of woman has never had a chance of balancing the progress of civilization, and for that reason, civilizations have repeatedly fallen, as our present civilization must inevitably fall because of its own unbalance and disunity in all of the essentials necessary for a normal existence. For thousands of years, the pagan barbarian civilization remained at a very low, unchanging level. About 800 years ago, a greater spiritual awakening advanced man to an ever-increasing level. Steadily gathering momentum, it progressed the human race farther intellectually in the last 100 years than in previous thousands of years. During the last 800 years, painting and music and literature, the greatest of the spiritually transforming arts, came into being. Sculpture and architecture had been here before. These are the static arts which did not reach to the soul of early man. The rhythms of music and painting express the meter of man's heartbeat and the universal heartbeat. They have the power to reach the soul through their dynamism, which sculpture and architecture lacked. The diatonic scale in music was unknown to man until 100 years after Leonardo lived. Caesar never knew the divine music which is ours to know. The human consciousness had not unfolded in that day to the stage where it would have meaning. A Bach, Beethoven, or Wagner rendition would have been but boring noise to a Caesar or Nero, just as it still is to a prizefighter or any lover of bloodshedding sports today. An age of paganism, which gloried in gladiatorial fights, one in which the greatest pleasure of women and children was in witnessing lions rend humans, or bloodshed of man by man in the arenas of that day, could not possibly have understood our tonal music had they had it. Music, however, was the greatest cause of bringing love into the human race. As the music, painting, and sculpture of the great masters came into the world, cruelty and bloodlust went out of it. The rhythmic beat of all great music and the tonal harmonies of all great art interprets the universal heartbeat. It reaches man's soul by inducing inner thinking to replace outer sensing. Inner thinking is meditative and gives birth to desire for prayer, and prayer is an innate and intuitive desire to talk to God. The growth of music awakened the spiritual in man and inspired in him the urge to find God. Music and worship are synonymous. Each is the other. The Christian spirit rose from its ashes and uplifted man one step higher upon his long climb. It was but a little step higher, but it transformed the human race. The power of the newly awakened Christian spirit and the first spiritual rebirth of this barbarian age brought world culture and its consequent higher stage of human friendliness up to the standard which gave us the 8 great centuries of progress which we are now about to lose. It did not bring knowledge, however. Man's concepts are still pagan. His concept of God is still a great powerful man with a physical body and a great capacity to wrath. Human understanding is not yet unfolded to the point where it can comprehend power and love in an invisible God, even though the greatest power known to man is gravity, and gravity is invisible. Nor can the pagan mind comprehend heaven being anywhere but above the earth among the clouds where good people ascend to when they die. Pagan concepts inherited from pagan legends and superstitions prevent Christian practice from advancing at the same pace as Christian spirit, as indicated by the steady rise of world culture. Christian spirit without Christian practice will never make a Christian world. The ultimate of a Christian world is the unity and peace which comes from knowledge of God's ways and practices. It means one world unity and brotherly love and obedience to God's one law of rhythmic, balanced interchange in all man's transactions with man as nature observes that law in her transactions. Spiritual culture rose steadily for centuries, but barbaric greed and primate memories of blood and conquest in the masses were not eliminated sufficiently to balance the spiritual growth which was transforming the few. Spiritual growth, however, was sufficiently strong in man to give birth to an electric age which completely transformed world thinking and living conditions. Our past 100 years of progress have been greater than all of the centuries preceding it since the days of Renaissance. By the year 1900, man had gained the whole world at the price of his soul. During all these centuries, while the silent voice had been awakening the divine spark in countless thousands of souls, the masses preferred to continue their barbarian practices. Today, the mass barbarian is syncopating the universal rhythms of the great masters into the jungle rhythms of their understanding. The high point of scientific advancement is now an integral part of the huge man-killing industry which man has set up in his man-built world. Instead of the golden rule, love ye one another world, which is the basis of the Christian spirit. As love again goes out of the world, ugliness and brutality are coming into it, and all human culture is in all human practice. As the culture-loving people of the Hellenic age saw its beautiful sculptures thrown into the seas, so do the culture-loving people of today see the ugliness of modern art gradually infiltrating even our art museums, and the jazz of jungle rhythms displace our gracious minuet and our happy Viennese waltz. Even the musical instruments, which have the capacity of reaching the soul through their likeness to nature's sounds, are being discarded from all but the symphony orchestras and replaced with noisy brass instruments to please the ever-increasing decadence of the masses. The poetic quality of musical rendition is being replaced with raucous noise, more reminiscent of the jungle than of gentility. The violin, flute, and piccolo are suggestive of whispering winds, the songs of birds, the reedy sounds of insects, and the humming, droning, buzzing, and chirping sounds of wood life. The soft, dreamy, restful dinner music of the 1900 era, which lent inspiration to social gatherings, has been replaced with ear-splitting brass horns in dining rooms, nightclubs, and television. The rhythmic harmonies of our fast-disappearing culture are no longer heard, and their stead as much discord as possible is introduced into syncopating melodies to destroy all that is fine and uplifting in this greatest of the spiritual arts. Cultural degradation is always paralleled by sex degeneration, sex perversion, and a fast lowering of the moral code. Every falling civilization follows this same pattern of growing sex bestiality, which multiplies as culture lowers and the fine arts disappear from their thrones. The increase of sex perversion in Greece kept pace with its death of culture. This pattern is again repeating itself in our own rapidly falling civilization. All forms of sex perversion are rapidly increasing, even among the children of our present age. Sex perversion leads very rapidly to the jungle and awakens, even in children, the desire to kill. Over and over again, the world is shocked by present killings for sheer pleasure. The world attributes these events to youth delinquency. Instead of that, they are the fruit of world decadence. Delinquency is not confined to youth alone. There is marked delinquency in every walk of life. The rapid increase in crime by adult delinquents more than matches the degradation of our youth. The matter which should greatly concern our present-day intellectuals is the fact that each succeeding generation of youth will be born into a lower moral status of civilization. Eventually, all that is fine in the human race will not even be in memory for centuries, except among the few who keep the light burning between these dark periods in monasteries or secluded places. The spiritually exalted ones kept the light burning during the Dark Ages until the rebirth of civilization in the 14th century. Unless we immediately begin to transform the human race to a man-for-man basis to replace the present man-against-man basis, the human race is as certain to fall again as it has so many times fallen in the past for the same reason. If this does happen, there are more of the spiritually illumined among us to carry the light over the dark intervening centuries than there were during the last fall of man. Even these would find life hard, difficult, and dangerous. They would have to live very secluded lives in remote mountain wildernesses, and very probably in high-walled castles of medieval architecture to protect their groups from marauding bandits in the lawless centuries which would follow. Crime and youth delinquency have brought such moral degradation to the world that thinking people are now saying that only a great spiritual awakening can save the world. A spiritual awakening is impossible which does not conform with spiritual laws. Spiritual teachings which do not conform with God's law can be likened to the desires of a man who wishes to be good, happy, and peaceful, but acquired money for that purpose by burglary, larceny, and cruelty. The foregoing is an excellent picture of our man-made world since its first spiritual resurrection in the 14th century. This could not have happened had man and women grown equally in the building of our civilization. It is quite probable that the human race could have found the enduring peace for which it was searching within another 100 years if it had not been forced to reap the harvest of enmity and hate which empire builders had sown into the world pattern. This is a great pity, for the world is on the eve of a greater 100 years than our last 100. The electronic age, which is now in the making, will make our present miracle world seem quite primitive. This promised unfolding will be impossible to build against the resistance of the present world retrogression toward ever-multiplying disunity. We have not been permitted that extra 100 years of peace which would have probably led to the equalization of man and woman in government affairs. We are now beginning to put this equalization into practice, however, for men no longer think of it as being ridiculous for women to occupy high seats in industry and government. Had man and woman worked equally together in these past 100 years, the return to man-killing would undoubtedly not have happened, and we would not now be facing the terrible harvest of past man-killings. We have prayed for happiness, peace, and prosperity for ourselves while plundering our neighbor to take his peace, happiness, and prosperity away from him. Unknowingly, we have actually done to ourselves what we have done to our neighbor. We built the image of ourselves into our empires, and they tumbled like a house of cards. In killing 1 million sons of neighbors, we kill 10 million of our own sons. For each $1 billion plundered to enrich us, we are impoverished by $10 billion of debt. We did not know what we were doing. We were immoral pagans working according to the pattern of our barbarian nature as truly and as abnormally as primate man acted in the pattern of his true primate nature. Ignorance of the law does not excuse us, however. It never does. We shall continue to live in a barbarian world of our own making as long as we practice barbarian ways. We have not yet known man nor God sufficiently to comprehend our close relation, which necessitates coordination and cooperation in whatever God and man do together. Man's failure to work with God and the penalty which he brings down upon himself for such disobedience is plainly set down in the following quotation from the message of the divine Iliad. Serve first thy brother, hurt first thyself rather than thy neighbor, gain naught from him unbalanced by thy giving. Protect thou the weak with thy strength, for if thou use thy strength against him, his weakness will prevail against thee, and thy strength will avail thee not. Man has violated this law all through his barbarian days, and is still violating it while hoping to evade its consequences. Every weak nation he has conquered is today the conqueror. The very theory of conquest by wars for purpose of enrichment, while the effect of every war ever fought by man is impoverishment. How many more times must man suffer the agonies of war before he finally knows the law by paying the price of learning his lessons through more suffering? In summary, this barbarian age might be briefly summed up as a sense-dominated, man-controlled age in which greed for material gain motivated man to take as much as he could by giving as little as he could give. During its history, the spiritual qualities of man began to unfold because of the birth among them of divinely inspired messengers who came into the world to help man's unfolding. Their teachings were beyond man's comprehension, but the awakening of desire for spiritual unfoldment grew strong in him. These teachings might have brought the human race to a realization of its oneness with God and the brotherhood of man, save for the much stronger innate memories of its primate man-killing days. During its entire period, this age has been marked with a belief in evil because of a practice of what it believed to be evil. Its most hopeful sign of progress was the rise of woman from utter insignificance to a sufficiently high place within the last 50 years to allow her to vote in man's affairs of government, which still remained man-controlled, however. That is the first step toward the necessary man-woman equalization, but it is only a very little step because of these immaturities in the slowly unfolding human race. Its civilizations fell many times, as our civilization is now once again inevitably falling. Let us pray that the men and women of the world will unite in time to reverse this decadence to a more glorious renaissance than our world has ever known. Really, really something to think about in this present moment where we are sitting. So, very interesting. Okay, see ya.